welcome back to Living Grounded. I'm Ella. I'm here with Tim.
Hello.
Each week in our episodes, we answer one question to help us continue living grounded in Christ. On Sunday, we kicked off a 3-week sermon series called Serving Without Sinking, and we're exploring how we can serve Christ and keep our joy. Sunday's sermon was really looking at the heart of serving. Where do we begin with all of this? And it's at the person of Jesus. So I encourage you to check that out in the Village app or in Spotify. Today's episode, I wanted to ask you a question, Jim. You've been serving for how long?
Nearly 30 years.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
You've got 7 principles for us today.
Just 5.
5 principles for us today.
Didn't want to keep you here too.
Yeah.
Wanted to serve you in the same.
Principles you've learned throughout your serving journey.
Yep.
So the first principle was...
We're going to get one from you too.
Yes. Yeah.
So just so you remember that. Yeah.
If you do it for the praise, you'll be disappointed.
Yeah. I remember I would have first walked into a church when I was 14 and, as a 14-year-old, went to a pretty tough school. Bulli High back then was a pretty rough place. People weren't very nice, and you go into a church and it's just really nice people. They really were nice to you, especially when you new. People are especially nice to you.
Yeah.
When you serve, you kind of pick some of the things up of church life, don't you? You start serving, and people are like, "Wow, that's so good that you're doing some of these things." I remember one of the areas that I kind of put my hand up for, last kind of flashback sort of thing. Back in the day, there was no projectors like we have now, or TV like we have now. You used to have to use, an overhead projector, which was, one of these had a light that pointed towards the screen, and you had to put handmade.
Yeah.
You had to put handmade stencils, slides on there that had been handwritten out, and that used to be my job. My job was to change the transparencies.
That was a long.
Whatever. That's a long time ago. I'm old. People used to go, "Oh, good on you, mate." I used to get a fair bit of praise for doing that and doing it well. This carries on for a year or two, especially when you're young. People notice, but eventually, people stop praising you for serving. They just start to kind of see it as normal. And I remember kind of having a bit of an existential crisis about this. Like, what do I need to do more? Like, do I need to do? Oh, you know what I need to do? I need to do things on stage. I need to, become a muso, a singer, or people
can see you.
Yeah, so people can see more, and then those guys get the real praise. Here's the thing: if you do it for the praise, you will end up being disappointed. Eventually, people will stop praising you, and even then, even if they don't, that praise becomes hollow. You start to realize that it's just for the flashiness. Sometimes it's not real, and you'll also realize that God is not overly interested in. He is not pleased by you doing it for your own praise. This is Matthew 6 verse 1. So don't do. Jesus. I'm paraphrasing, but Jesus essentially says, don't do things to be praised before people. Don't show your righteousness before others for the sake of praise. I think it's an important question. What are you in it for? What are you in it for? Is it for people's praise? Is it for God's sake? Pleasing God, loving others. Yeah.
Second principle: the dirty jobs grow you.
Yeah, I remember I would have been year 10, and in year 10, I didn't have too many thoughts yet about careers, or I wasn't overly interested. I wasn't really very mature guy, and I got to work experience time year 10. I'm like, what in the world am I going to do for work experience? Like, I'm not interested in it. I thought, let's do it at church. That'll be pretty cool, cruisy. Again, who knows? Probably like, oh man, people will think that's awesome. I don't know why I thought that. Anyway, and I don't know. My youth pastor showed a level of discernment here. I think. I don't know whether they picked up on why I was probably choosing the church to do work experience, or whether it was they saw a kid from a fairly wealthy background and had it pretty easy, this sort of stuff. But either way, they said, I thought I was going in for, I don't know, shadowing the youth minister or something like that. But they go, oh no, your job this week is to clean the Youth on Fire bus. So we used to have, at our church, we used to have this bus. It was, mini bus, and secondhand. They used, they painted it to, be the youth. It was known as the Youth on Fire bus. Would pick up kids, drop them home, all this sort of stuff. But of course, lots of Macca's runs, lots of kids being in there, muddy, dirty, the full deal.
Yeah.
It was filthy, this thing. And I just remember like going, oh, I was so angry that they'd asked me to do this. I was so cranky.
So long.
Yeah, there's a wonderful bit in a movie that's always stuck with me. Bruce Almighty, the movie, and Morgan Freeman acting as kind of a personification of God, and the main character meets Morgan Freeman in an empty kind of warehouse sort of thing, and he's just there mopping, and he says, come join me, come mop. There's freedom in it, son. And it's very true though that just doing kind of dirty manual labor sometimes, particularly in service for others, I think there's a wonderful freedom to it. I think I saw myself as a bit too special to be doing dirty jobs for others. I think I needed to be broken, to be honest, and to be broken into being a servant. We saw this, I think, in John 13, that, Jesus obviously he gets down and washes the feet of his disciples, but he says in verse 16, is the student greater than his master, in a sense? Are you greater than your teacher, I think is the point. Are you, do you think you are not able to do this sort of service because you think you're better or something along those lines? And I think there was something. I think it's a reminder of the humility of what it means to follow Christ. I'm nothing. Who am I to turn my nose up at any form of job, at any form of serving others? The truth is, we aren't worthy to serve Christ in the first place. We aren't serving Christ because he's like, oh, you're pretty great. He doesn't need our service. He offers to us for us to do these things so that we might share in the joy. He wants to share the joy of serving with us. So can I encourage you, don't avoid the dirty jobs. Embrace them. And that might be dirty in terms of, physical, filthy stuff, but also the dirty jobs in terms of hard people. Sometimes we can go, oh no, I want the easy serving.
People I get along with.
People I get along with, that's right. The easy wins, all this sort of stuff. One thing I always make sure is I try, and whenever there's kind of an opportunity, I'll do the bins at Village. I'll make sure I'm doing the washing up of the plates, because I want to cultivate that humility. I think that's a healthy, good thing. Yeah.
All right. Principle 3. Communism doesn't work.
I just wanted to stick this in for a little political jab. No, one of the things I've noticed, and myself included, that discourages servants the most is when they feel like they're the only one serving. When they feel like they're the only one really serving, I've experienced this so many times, and that's not like a humble brag thing. I'm just saying, you feel this, and it's not right. In my late 20s, I was proper busy. Ilaria would have been around 1. I was working full-time as a high school teacher. I'd started a master's in theology, and I was doing probably about 5 to 10 hours a week at our church as youth pastor and managing Sunday gatherings. And there was another guy at church who was on staff, and he was getting paid what I thought was a fair bit for, it seemed like, doing almost nothing. Now, I'm sure he was probably doing more than I thought he was. In these situations, we always inflate our own level of service and deflate other people's. That's a sinful. That's how our sinful minds work. But even if I was fairly right, who cares? Who cares? Am I doing it for the money? Am I doing it for the credit again? Am I expecting some sort of equality of service? Some sort of serving communism? Well, if that's the case, then you need to think very differently, because you're forgetting about who you should be comparing yourself to. If it's about equality of service, well, let's start maybe by comparing ourselves to Paul or to Peter. Why not Jesus himself? Is that the equality? You don't even have to go to the apostles if you want. Go and read Hudson Taylor's biography like we have, or something like that. Imagine how discouraged they could be at your levels of service. But maybe they wouldn't be like that. Maybe because they're a little bit more mature than we can be sometimes. Maybe they don't think like that. Here's the question to ask, and here's the question I've had to ask myself many times. Are you serving because everyone else is serving at the same level as you, or whatever? Or if no one else was serving Jesus, would you? Would you do it? And I've had to kind of cultivate the conviction that, hey, even if every other person stopped, I'll keep serving. I'll keep following Jesus. I'll keep doing it for Jesus. I'll keep doing it out of love for others, not for any other reason. And I think when you can work on that place, rather than comparing yourself to others and expecting some sort of equality, you'll have freedom in serving, because you're just doing it for him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we hate unfairness, don't we?
We do. We hate injustice, especially when we're the victim. We're okay if we're the perpetrator. Yeah. Ella, give us your one.
Yeah. People are often happier to help than you think they are.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I learned this a couple of years ago. Was running like a candle making workshop. It was my first time running this sort of thing, and I thought I could do it all on my own. Like, I was like, can't be that hard. I had a bit of extra time in the lead up to like do the planning and organizing and things. And on the day, I felt like I set aside enough time for myself to do it all. But I only organized like one person to come like 20 minutes before and do some of the food and tea and stuff. And very quickly I realized, as I was like so exhausted and like flustered as everyone was arriving, like things weren't set up yet. Like there was no music. I wanted there to be music, and the food wasn't out, and all of these things. It just made me realize, like, oh man, I really needed to ask some people for help.
Yeah.
And yeah, I couldn't even like enjoy the workshop, and I was running that part of it too, and I just was so like flustered the whole time that I got to the end of it and it was all a blur. And so many people came up to me and were like, oh, like you should have messaged me. I would have loved to help. And like, if you run it again, I would love to be there to help you. You shouldn't be doing all this on your own, all of that. Anyway, quickly realized people are really happy to help and to serve. And it would have been a lot more joyful for me having other people to do it with.
Yeah. I think that's good. Yeah. We have this kind of fear and worry of putting people out instead of how our mindset needs to be, which is I'm sharing the joy.
Yeah.
I'm giving people an opportunity to enjoy this and to have joy serving in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Your fourth principle.
Yep.
Reject balance and pursue thresholds.
Yeah, I reckon, this is a bit simplistic, but I reckon there's two types of ways of thinking in life. There's a balance approach and a growth approach. So take running, for example. Some people are just like, I'm going for a run and I go for the same run all the time and I'm not trying to go any faster or any further. I'm just kind of doing a kind of maintenance level of running. And other people approach it as, no, I'm going to try and grow as a runner. I'm going to try and pursue, so in kind of physical education circles, it's the idea of taking on thresholds. So you pursue overcoming a threshold, and that then becomes your new normal, and so on. Now, in life, in certain areas of life, that's fine. In running, that's fine. I don't particularly care if anyone is like, I just want a kind of balanced kind of run. But I think our culture at the moment is really pushing a general philosophy of life that you are trying to maintain some sort of balance. Just you're just trying to kind of find a happy place that isn't very painful, doesn't cause much discomfort, just kind of works, Whereas I think Paul shows the Christian life to be more along the lines of the growth orientated. So, you can read about this in 1 Corinthians 9. He talks about he approaches life as a race to run, and he disciplines himself. He pursues life as if there's a prize at the end, and as if he's a person who wants to win that prize. And so, he disciplines himself to win it. Now, I think he's got a particular idea of that discipline. It's to fight against sin and so on. But that can easily be applied to the area of service. Usually the thing that stops us serving is selfishness. It's wanting to use time, energy, money, all these things that we have for our own kind of purposes and pleasures and so on. And I think Paul says, he says other places, or Peter says that I think the time is short. Paul in 2 Corinthians 5, it's now is the time for people to hear the gospel, for people to be saved. This is the time. I think that all leads us to have to kind of reject that I'm here to just have this quite comfortable, balanced existence, and leads us to go, no, I need to have a growth mindset in terms of being a servant. Now, I want to be very careful. Context does matter here. What does it mean to grow in being a servant, in serving others? Well, it looks really different if you're a mum with 3 kids under 5 and a part-time job compared to a 19-year-old on a gap year. It looks really different for a worker who commutes to the city versus a worker who works from home, or a person with chronic fatigue and so on. The question I think for each one of us to ask is, I'm not going to go through each one of our contexts. You know your context. The question to ask is, what does it look like for me to continue to grow as a servant, to push into new thresholds, if you like, and have a new normal of what it is to be sacrificial? It might look like simply praying more for other people than yourself. It might look like doing an extra role at Village, or it might not look like more hours served at, say, Village or in your local church, but it could look like taking on a more stressful role. It could be committing to meeting up with a person a week to read the Bible and encourage them. Look, the truth is, there's kind of, again, I could just rattle off ongoing. Like, there's no shortage of opportunities at these things. But I would encourage you to think about what does wisely. Okay, we're not talking here about a person going from, to use the marathon analogy, going from never having put joggers on before to going, I'm going to run a marathon here. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what does it look like to take wise growth kind of steps as a servant.
Cool. Principle 5. Where are your carbs coming from?
Yeah. Sorry, just off the back of that. Obviously, my
okay.
head was still in the running analogy. But we want to be servants who also last the distance. I think one of the reasons why people kind of have gone to that balance kind of talk is because they've seen people overexert themselves, injure themselves serving, if you like,
Yeah.
and then they're out for a time. And that, I totally get that. But like I said, I would argue that burnout usually happens because people are serving for the wrong reasons rather than they've tried to serve way too much. That can happen, but generally I think it's because they're serving for the wrong reasons. If you serve for people's praise, if you serve for recognition, if you serve to get blessed by God in some form of material way, that's like trying to run a marathon but grabbing a Coke at the water station. You're not going to last. But when we come to Jesus to be our fuel, that's like having a big pasta the night before your race. That's the good stuff. That's the gel. That's what the marathon runners who usually at the moment. That's the good stuff at the drinks table. And 2023, I learned this, I think, the most. 2023 was a really hard year. It was a hard year for the village. A lot of pastoral issues, a lot of issues that just felt like I couldn't fix. They were just beyond me to resolve. It wasn't just pastoral stuff. It was money stuff. It was not enough people giving or serving a village. But it really did. I feel like God putting me and us in that situation really forced me to ask the question, where am I turning to for the fuel of serving? Is it things going really well? Because I think that's sometimes, particularly for pastors, that can kind of be the fuel. Oh, things are going really well. I can keep serving. But if that's what it is, then again, God doesn't promise that things are always going to go really well. And so it's might not be a Coke, but it's certainly not the most helpful thing to be drawing on. I had to come to Jesus, and thank God, praise God. In His kindness, He drew me to Himself. He helped me see the bigger picture of what God might be doing. He helped me see that that Jesus served, even though on one level, everything he would have seen with his eyes was, this is going terribly. Everyone has abandoned me. And yet Jesus continued to serve. The Psalms are full of moments where God's people are pursuing life with God, trusting Him, but life's not going well. They teach the lesson, cry out to God, find your refuge in Him, come into the shadow of His wing. And thankfully, I testify that I think to some extent I did that and have learned that principle, and it stayed with me. Abide in the vine, Jesus says in John 15 to His disciples. Abide in Him, abide in His work on the cross, abide in the hope of the resurrection, abide in the inheritance we have and look forward to, abide in the reminder that God is with you. He is with you by His Spirit. Remember His faithfulness. Turn to Him in prayer. That's carbs. That's good carbs. They'll keep you going in the long run, but is serving others. Yeah.
That's good. Thank you. Keen to keep exploring this on Sunday as well, in the sermon series.
Yep.
What can we explore on Sunday?
Yeah, so we're going to do some identity work. We start with, let's remember who we're serving, and that's a big why. But I think the second piece is that it's a real battle at the moment to kind of serve, because we're being told that you're not a servant, you're a consumer, or many other things that actually are in conflict with being a servant. And depending on how convinced you are of some of that, in that identity wrestle, is going to make service a lot harder or a lot easier. Yeah. So we'll wrestle with that. Who are we?